How do you convert to Islam? What do you say during a prayer? How can we fight radical Islam? Why do some people have a spot on their forehead?
Radical Islam is me, I'm going to judge you.
So what does Eid mean?
I don't have to impose anything on you, but if you're in difficulty, it's my duty to help you.
Come and meet me when you're here today. I turn you away.
That's why we're here. That's just why we're here.
I've received two.
Message of peace.
That's all we have.
Today we've got an appointment at the Grand Mosque of Paris. We're going to meet the rector of the mosque, the director, the imam, and visit the mosque. In previous videos, I visited a synagogue and a church, and today we're visiting a mosque. We're going to ask them all the questions we can think of, and they're going to answer them for us. Let's go for the video. Monsieur le Recteur, thank you for receiving us. Here we are then.
We're at the main entrance to the Grand Mosque of Paris. There's a Quranic verse here. This is the door of peace. Whoever enters this mosque enters in peace and will be safe here. Everyone is welcome, whether they're churchgoers or not, or simply visitors, to come and use the mosque. You know, there are students who come, who settle in, who draw. Inside. So we're in Haussmannian architecture, and then suddenly we're in Arab Moresque architecture. This mosque is going to be 100 years old. In any case, it has harmoniously settled into this beautiful district of the Paris center. So, as we're in the middle of Ramadan, this poster serves to remind the Muslim faithful that they must pay the sum of €7 to purify the month of Ramadan that is now passing. An adult must pay €7 for himself, for his wife, and for his children. If you're a single adult living on your own, you pay the €7. The sum of €7 is set according to standard of living and represents more or less the cost of a meal. The month of Ramadan is a month that allows Muslims to remember that we have to be frugal, that there are people around us who don't have enough to eat. So there's this whole spiritual aspect. And so to end the month, the person pays this sum of €7.
So where does the money go?
The Muslim can give it to someone around him, someone who needs the money. If he gives it to the mosque, we are obliged to give it either to people in need or to associations that know how to use the money. We go here.
Let's go. What is the rector's mission?
In the hierarchy of religious functions, there's no such thing. There's only the imam. The rector, because here at the Grande Mosquée de Paris, there was both the mosque and an institute of the Grande Mosquée de Paris. That's how the director of the mosque got the title of rector.
Okay, but the rector is sort of the director of the premises.
He's, let's say, the mosque's CEO. Here he is, the mosque's CEO. In 2922, when we decided to build it, when we started work, it was on a surface area of 7,500 square meters. And at the time, the architect had decided that 50% of the mosque would be a garden. Hello, here we have our main guide, who is available to those who come to visit.
Very well, nice to meet you.
So, we've got this little area where tourists can come and pay a token fee, so the guide can accompany them, and so on. We also sell a few objects and books for people interested in learning more about the Muslim religion. The inauguration took place in 1926. The mosque was built just after the First World War, following the sacrifice of many Muslims who died in the First World War. For France, we wanted to give Islam a special place in recognition of the sacrifice of Muslims during the First World War. All this meant that it took a long time to build. And look at the architectural aspect. There's a roof that was put on afterwards.
Because we're in Paris and it's raining.
It's really an experimental roof that can be opened when the weather's fine. The patio is also used for prayer, particularly on Fridays, because Friday, if you like, is the big day for Muslims. Jumu'ah in Arabic, the gathering. It's really, there are a lot more people. And the Friday prayer with the faithful. In the early afternoon, the Imam will give his sermon at 1:50 p.m. It lasts about 20 minutes with preaching and prayer. It's the big Friday prayer. Prayer is a moment of encounter with the Creator. Muslims must prepare themselves psychologically for this encounter. There's a whole period of preparation, including ablutions. He must be in a state of purity when he goes to pray.
How long do prayers last?
Well, there are 5 prayers a day, between 3 and 4 minutes maximum.
Prayers can be said just about anywhere.
Anywhere or not, it should be in a relatively clean place to be able to isolate yourself somewhere. Then there are the 5 prayers, the prayer at the start of the day, at daybreak, and then after that, you'll have the one for half the day, starting at noon, noon and a half, depending on the calculation, because Islam is organized according to a lunar calendar. There are time changes thanks to iPhones. We've got all the apps, we've got the timetables and so on. We have another one that's at noon or in the afternoon, and we have a prayer at dusk. So today, from sunrise to sunset, we're fasting.
Because it's Ramadan at the moment?
It's Ramadan now, which lasts between 29 and 30 days. And so at the end of the day or nightfall, and at that time, we do this prayer and break the fast.
With dates.
Here's the famous date, the glass of milk. And then an hour and a half later, you have the last prayer of the night, the Aisha, which brings the 5 daily prayers to a close.
Every day?
Every day.
We pass through the gardens.
Then we'll talk about the gardens, because I think they're important. It's a place of serenity where the practitioner, when he comes in, has to be completely at peace.
So they're ablution man and ablution woman?
Absolutely. Here we're going to enter the men's ablution room. Here you can remove your clothes. You must remove your shoes and socks. You must have bare forearms to be able to perform what we call ablutions. As I said, it's a moment of purification. So first we wash. You start by washing your hands, then you wash your mouth 3 times, your nose and your ears. You run water over your hair, then you perform forearm ablutions. So you always start with the right and then the feet up to the left.
This is before each prayer?
Before every prayer. So what is it that calls your ablution into question? If you've been to the toilet, you're no longer in a state of ablution. These moments aren't just physical. It's also important spiritually not to have bad ideas. I'm angry with people. I'm going to have dark thoughts. And at the same time, I'm going to say my prayers. It's just not possible. There has to be a balance between the physical and the spiritual, because in life there are stresses. And that's what we call small ablutions.
Under what circumstances do we perform great ablutions?
Sexual intercourse, in particular. It's a good idea on Fridays to perform a grand ablution before going to the mosque. And so it is said every time that when you go to the mosque for the Friday prayer, you must be pure, dress yourself, perfume yourself, because you're going to be in contact with the faithful. I mustn't have any odors that might bother you or anything.
And once that's done, you can go to prayer.
You can go to the prayer room.
After you...
Thank you very much.
Here, I'll show you the women's prayer room. In Islam, when there's only one prayer room, it's the men in the front and the women in the back.
Why is there a little separation like that?
It's written that way. Today, there are certain practices in mosques that consider that men and women can pray next to each other. But for us, it's really, we're in the classical religious tradition. We've provided them with a room that's bigger than the men's prayer room. They're together, they arrive before the prayer so they can talk and exchange with each other. And of course, there are microphones so that the women can hear the priest. And then the Imam will accompany us. His name is Sheikh Khaled. So this is Thibaut.
Pleased to meet you. Thank you very much. Thank you for seeing us in any case. You can see that there's different writing in Arabic. What does this place mean a little bit?
In fact, it's a collection of poems. Inside there are Quranic verses, there are verses about the importance of the mosque to the Muslim, the importance of prayer, the importance of caring for your fellow man, whatever his religion.
Are we going to the prayer room or not?
The Taraweeh prayer, the night prayer for Muslims on Ramadan, it's full every night. We put rugs down and they pray. Friday prayers are held here too. Night prayer, same thing, we do it here. In the printing room, it's touristy, of course, but when the prayer room is full, we come here to pray. Who are you?
What does the Tal prayer mean?
Taraweeh. Taraweeh, or the night prayer.
The night prayer is
Taraweeh
simply,
is
we'll
especially busy during Ramadan, so we generally do 8 plus 3. The 3 are surrogatory prayers that are held throughout the year after the scarf. And we always close with what we call the oyster. With it, it's like closing the door and waiting for tomorrow. So whoever wants to have more action, he gets closer to his Creator with his surrogatory prayers, with other surrogatory actions.
all this culture we learn as we go along.
Initially, what we advise, for example, converts or young people, when they're learning, we ask them to do things mechanically without trying to understand each other. The Imam did this, I do this, he bows, then they edit me. Why do I do this? Because when I say Allah, understanding that God is great, I leave everything behind and go to Him. I go to seek God's mercy, not just for myself, but for everyone. And so I meditate on each act. I bow my head and seek out the spiritual side that lies between me and my Creator. Prayer in itself is a spiritual relationship between the servant and his or her Creator. Back then, there were no carpets in prayer halls, so it was all sand and you could walk in with your shoes on, but that's
so now
all
you have to
changed
take
now,
off your shoes.
and that's
it's
that.
just for cleanliness.
Cleanliness and respect for the environment. It's a sanctified environment.
Purity and cleanliness.
That's it. Mosques are God's homes. In fact, it's as if you were invited into God's home. All right then. Every Muslim, when he or she enters the prayer hall, has 2 rakats, 2 units of fasting and bending. This is the mosque greeting, and this is individual. I'm going to do 2 units, Mr. Reader, 2 units, then we have to finish them. If it's prayer time, then I'll take it. So here at the Paris Mosque, we've put currents everywhere in Arabic and French, so I can sit here. If I have a reading, because every Muslim has a reading, what we call the ratib. Every day he reads from page 3 to page 4 according to what he can, according to his time. So I sit down and read. By this time I've finished what we call the invocations. I need something, I'm at his place. I raise my hands. I begin by praising him. Give thanks for all the blessings he has done for me, for you, for the rector. I pray over the professor. That's an ethic too. Then I ask him for whatever I want.
For example, health.
Peace in this world. I can even buy a car. I ask him to help me. Whatever I want, I can ask him. And in this place, it's himself who answers.
So when the faithful are in the prayer room, they read the Quran, make invocations and so on, and they wait for the Imam to make the adhan, the call to prayer. In Muslim countries, prophetic tradition dictated that the Imam had to stand on a mound to be heard. Later, mosques with minarets were built. So the most important thing is that his voice is heard, so that all the faithful know that it's time for prayer. So we're in France. Symbolically, the minaret is there, but we don't call for prayer. I agree, because at the moment we're not going to disturb our neighbors, those who aren't Muslims, by hearing a call to prayer like that. It's just not normal. So we're in a secular state too. We can't make this kind of call, but we do it here in the symbolic courtyard.
How long have you been an imam?
Almost 15 years.
And how do you become an imam? Is there a school?
We have a 3-year training program for imams here. We have theological training. There's also the environmental side where we are. So, for example, we need to have a secular God to know where we live. As for religious discourse, we're working on a workshop with the rector, which is huge. We've been working on it for 2 years. How can an imam speak, be consulted, not a person, whether Muslim or not, and what should his response be? Because what we call the religious arbiter, the fatwa, what we can say in a Muslim country 100%, we can't say here. So here we have to adapt to the person's context.
Okay.
And for that, we take the 4 legal schools to find a solution to his question.
So why did you want to become an imam?
I have a scientific background. I was a state engineer.
Okay.
But ever since I was little, I didn't want to do, I wanted to be an imam, not imam on the religious side, except that at the time my dad didn't want me to. So I brought back my diploma. I did what you asked me to do. Can I do the religious thing? He said, okay.
We have the Grande Mosquée de Paris application, Salah, Today, the early afternoon prayer is at 13:54. The mid-afternoon prayer, as I said, is at 5:30. And the prayer that goes from nightfall, when we can break the fast and at the same time do this prayer, which is at 20:27.
This means that everyday prayer times change.
Absolutely, absolutely. You really have to keep up. And you've got the last prayer of the night at 22:12, Salat Taraweeh.
If the last prayer was at 10:12 p.m. and you're tired and want to go to bed,
You have to do it anyway.
so you have to set the alarm clock to pray and then go back to sleep.
Okay, so what happens inside when you miss a prayer?
When you miss a prayer, it's not catastrophic. You just have to do it again. There are exceptions. When you're traveling, when you're sick, and so on. Because in Islam, if you like, there's a Quranic verse which says that it's God who speaks. I'm not here to constrain you. I'm here to make things easier for you. I'm here to make things easier for you. And so, based on this verse, a huge number of arrangements are made.
When you talk about travel, when you're going to be on a plane for 12 hours, etc., we're going to lighten the prayers. Ramadan too means that all obligations are lightened if you're ill or away from home. There are hours for prayer, but we work. If you're a bus driver and you can't stop to say your prayers, you group them together at the end. As a lawyer, I sometimes couldn't pray during the day. When I got home in the evening, I'd do them. Of course, the ideal situation would be to pray at all hours, but at the same time, we live in a modern world. You're in a secular state. You can't afford to pray. Get out of class, that's it. You're a teacher, and then you say to your pupils, wait, I'm going out to do my prayer and I'll be back. That's not normal. All this is taken into account in our religious practice.
I'm Catholic, I was baptized. How do you convert to Islam?
We talk to the person and find out why he or she wants to convert. Then we explain Islam and its cultural practice, focusing on the 5 pillars. Then we leave him some time to reflect. He thinks about it and sees if this religion really meets his expectations. He finds himself in this religion, or if he does. At that point, we ask him to make what we call the profession of faith. This is the first pillar.
Profession of faith, as with Catholics.
He pronounces it. Once he pronounces it, he becomes a Muslim. He has all the rights and duties. But after that, there are 4 pillars. So there's a daily religious practice. What makes me a Muslim or not?
First and foremost, this prayer room is managed. When the worshipper enters, he knows he's putting himself in this position. This is where the direction of Mecca was calculated at the time, and in 1922, when the first rector, whose name was Kadhor ben Gabrit at the time, brought back a large compass to make an accurate calculation of Mecca. And that's where they built what's known as the mihrab, which is this niche where you find this in every mosque in the world. That's where we know we're heading for Mecca. Let me show you the little application again. There you are looking for the Qibla, we're being watched. It's not very safe, but that's okay. It's strong because there's always a forward march. But here, if you like, is the direction, because back then these were the big compasses. I'll show you the photos later. And so this is an extremely important place because the Prophet of Islam in Medina has a mosque that recalls 2 directions. It's a very important mosque. It's where the Prophet went to say his prayers and so on. And at the very beginning of Islam, the direction of prayer was towards Jerusalem. And at one point during his prayer, the Prophet had a revelation that from then on, prayers were to be made in the direction of Mecca.
Is Mecca where the black space is?
That's it, absolutely. The Kaaba, which is this famous, as you say, black place with this material that is considered to have come from heaven. And we, as Muslims, consider Mecca to be the center of the world.
Why don't Muslims eat pork?
Let's talk about the dogmatic religious side. God has forbidden us. That's what's written in the Quran. And on the other side, there are scientific studies that have proven that God is so powerful that he's a carrier of disease. And for us, it's more the dogmatic side. When there's a prescribed prohibition, we follow it. We know that God knows best. That's the spiritual side between me and my Creator. But under no circumstances can I say to a Muslim, you mustn't eat. I'm not a judge.
And then you have the mihrab, which is the most important point. Then there's the minbar. This minbar was, at the time, donated to the Paris Mosque by the King of Egypt in 1929. Really, it's inscribed here, Fouad Winyaz, who was King of Egypt at the time. And so the Imam, to do his preaching, goes up here. This is a truly sacred place. only he can get there. The Imam will preach from there so that everyone can hear him, everyone sees him. The mihrab and the minbar are really essential in a mosque.
In the time of the Prophet Salam, there were only 3 steps, and the Prophet of Islam, he climbed up to the 3rd step. Later it developed during the Ottoman Empire. Why did this happen? Because there were more people, so there was more visibility and everyone could hear and see him.
How many people can fit in this room?
Between 400 and 450.
What are the Imam's missions?
For us, it's mainly the religious side. First of all, we lead prayer, the 5 daily prayers and Friday prayers. Then we have offices, what we call French-speaking and Arabic-speaking religious services. When there's a dispute between parents, children, or spouses, they come to see us. So we listen to both sides of the story and try to work things out.
Like an advisor?
But above all, we're there to reconcile them, never to separate them. On the other hand, there's also the question of how to worship here in France in a non-Muslim country. For example, a student at university comes to us and says he's working all day, he's got a tutorial from 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., he can't pray. What should I do? So we have what we call flexible jurisprudence. We tell him when you have a break at 1 o'clock and you have a prayer at 1 o'clock, we tell him to combine the 2 prayers. His religious practice is there. And on the other hand, I'm talking about studies because the first verse that was revealed to the Prophet was seek knowledge. So at that point, we always try to give him a positive answer and one that's appropriate to his case.
You're flexible because we're not in a Muslim country?
For example, I'll be leading the prayer and the faithful, I'll stand here. That's just for humans. And all the worshippers will stand next to each other. Just stand there. I see, I'm going to say step forward.
I see.
I
Okay,
check
all right.
that everyone's ready. So I stand there inside and I have the microphone and they just follow me.
You're also facing Mecca. What do you say during a prayer?
So there's already the first act. We say, Allahu Akbar, God is great.
We start with God is great.
There are prayers that are said aloud and there are prayers that are said in a low voice. I recite the first surata, the prologue or opening of Al-Fatiha. Then I recite another surate. At the end, I bow. When I bow, all the faithful bow. During the bow, I make an invocation to God, the mosquée to God, the mosque in God, the great. Afterwards, I can ask God for something during the prostration. Because it was said and brought in a prophetic narration where the Prophet of Islam sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, the place where the servant and the handmaid are closest to their Creator is when they prostrate. When I prostrate, there are people who stay for a long time. Then I straighten up. Afterwards, I thank them for having allowed me to come here and gild it.
Why do some people have a spot on their forehead?
Because they pray a lot, but it doesn't have a religious connotation. Just because I don't have any and you do, doesn't mean you're better off. Because the scale with God, the best of you is the oldest. That's the scale. There's no difference between a white man and a black man, a tall man and a short man, except in piety. Godliness means coming closer to God, that is, following God's prescriptions. It's one of his prohibitions. So once we prostrate, then we stand up, for example. At a given moment, we'll remain seated and perform tashahhud. We ask God for something specific. Then we say the Abrahamic prayer for Ibrahim. Abraham is the grandfather of all Muslims. So we say, may God's prayers be on his messenger Ibrahim, as they were for his messenger Muhammad, ours. And may God be pleased with Ibrahim as he was for Muhammad. Then we say, salam. Salam is the greeting. Once I've bowed, I'm out of prayer. Then, when the Imam is there, he turns towards the faithful. So here, he was facing the congregation, and now he's turning around to face them. And then each member of the congregation makes certain invocations. There are certain names of God, and we repeat them 33 times, and it takes 2 minutes.
It's a bit like a rosary. There are many similarities with Catholics, like Je vous salue Marie, Notre Frère.
We greet God, that's the 33 theme. Then we praise him 33 times. And the last one, the 100th, we say, we're done. You want to leave, you can leave. You have a question for the Imam, that's when you're going to come closer, you're going to sit down. I have a question for you, it's private. So if it's time consuming, the Imam will tell you to come with me to the office. If it's just how to catch up on my prayer, so it takes 5 minutes, we'll explain it.
Are there other similarities between Islam and Judaism and also with Catholicism?
A person's faith, the validity of their Islam, is only 100% valid if they believe in all the other prophets. From Adam to Moses, Moses, Jonah, Abraham, Joseph, all the prophets are distinctions. There isn't a Muslim on earth. When he hears Musa, he says, come on, salam, may the peace of God be upon him. Jesus, may the peace of God be upon him. We'll go even further. We'll take the Quran. There isn't a single surata in the 114 suratis dedicated to one of the Prophet Salam's wives. For example, there isn't one to Aisha, but there is an entire surata dedicated to Maryam, Marie. So we call Mary Maryam, Jesus is Isa, but they're the same. So we have a surata, you can read it. It's by Aisha right to the end. It's all about Marie and Jesus, how she got pregnant or gave birth. And so that gives us the importance that Islam gives to Jesus and Maryam. So Islam is, you could say, it's taken from other religions. It has taken from Judaism and Christianity. It has brought its own touch, which is Islam. So we have common values. We have only one God, which is why we call it a religious religion. And if you are just now, Mr. Actor, he talked about the 10 minarets. You have 3 balls. It was said that these 3 balls are Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The last one, the little ball, is Islam, the last ray. Islam accepts all religions, all differences, and it's all about respect. 3 or 4 years ago, before COVID, we held an open house. We welcomed everyone. There were Christians who came, both men and women. And the Imam at the time quoted Maryam's famous surah. A woman asked me, do you believe in Mary? I said yes, and all evening she talks about Mary. I say yes. And at that point, like the deer, he was speaking in Arabic, so every time he stops, I try to tell him the meaning of the verse. I promise you, she cried.
There are a lot of people who don't
know that
the world would be a better place if people had a little culture.
There's a saying that just goes, come and listen to me, come and get to know me when you're here today. And I tell you everything. I tell you everything with an open heart. Since the rector has been here, he's been doing his utmost to really spread this message of peace and living together.
This message of peace.
That's all we want.
Thank you very much. Why are tattoos and piercings prohibited?
It's forbidden because the human being, it's like you, me, we are a deposit that God bequeathed to us that we must return to Him intact. So a tattoo changes the envelope a little. And so I have to give my deposit back as it should be. It's like cigarettes. There's no text that forbids cigarettes. But there is another verse that says, anything that harms your health is forbidden. Now, if I smoke, the next day I have to give my body back to God. And then I give it back with a disease, with a brain, with something else. So I have quanta. And the sacredness of the human body is more sacred than God's house in the cellar. And we have to take care of it.
Do some sport.
That's why I'm following you on your page.
Play sports.
But I'm not going
to
tell you, you shouldn't smoke. And the same goes for alcohol. You take it out of context, you read, have you seen the damage alcohol does? Enormous.
I don't drink alcohol.
Every year, the deaths. So when God forbids it, there's no need to forbid it. It's more for our health. It's more about how we're going to live with others, how we're going to live in society, and how we're going to benefit others.
The Muslim must always be in a state of discernment, i.e. tomorrow, if I'm in a state of inebriation,
Master of its means?
I may do things I'll regret later. Words, expressions, aggressive behavior, and so on. And the next day, when I wake up, I'm going to say, look, Thibaut, I behaved badly with him. And you'll see that when it comes to gambling, there are people who are unfortunately completely addicted. In Islam, we don't want Muslims to venture down this kind of path, which could really cost them their life story.
There are no casinos in Muslim countries.
In principle, no. And so all gambling, all alcohol, everything that harms physical and mental health is somehow forbidden in Islam. Make sure you don't overdo it. Even when you eat so that you can live, so that you can stay healthy. So that's the ethic, I'd say, of our religion. A line of conduct, a daily life. Absolutely. That's what's important.
We're coming to the end of Ramadan. What does the Eid prayer mean?
So Eid is the end of the month of Ramadan. As I said, we're on a lunar calendar, so the time will be 29 or 30 days. At that point, we'll decide, and the Imam's commission will meet. There will be what we call the night of the book. So the Imams will sit around the table and consider, is Tuesday Eid? So by then, we'll have done 29 days of fasting, or Wednesday. Okay, there'll be an extra day. Eid is the last day. There are lots of festive aspects too. In other words, families will be decking out their children in the finest clothes. because this is their first month of Ramadan. So there's a lot of joy involved. In the morning, it's breakfast time. For a month, we haven't had breakfast. So the mum, she's going to prepare breakfast and so on, and that's it. So the family comes to the mosque to say the Eid prayer, to follow the Imam's prayer. So the Imam enters through this door, goes to wish everyone, I'd say, a happy holiday. May it go well, because it's a very important moment in our spirituality.
It's easier to celebrate Ramadan in a completely Muslim country.
Because they adapt the schedules. But here, we still manage to adapt. And what I recommend, under the supervision of the Imam, is that fasting today should not be used as an excuse not to go to work or to ask your employer to let you go out and so on. It's a personal thing. We mustn't let our right, i.e., the 5 obligations we've talked about, interfere with our professional life. I don't have to impose anything on you because I'm a Muslim. So Thibaut, I don't talk to you during the month of Ramadan because you're not Muslim. I don't sit down with you, okay? We won't have lunch together because I can't, but I can invite you to dinner. In other words, we need to maintain, I'd say, our relationship with the rest of society. We can't close ourselves off or turn in on ourselves because I'm fasting, I'm not talking to you, you're smoking, I'm a smoker too. I'm not happy because you're smoking in front of me. No.
We must remain spiritually open.
There, that's it. As I was saying earlier about the ablutions, I don't have to impose anything on you. That's Islam too. I don't have to judge you. I don't have to judge anyone. Even if you're a Muslim and feel you shouldn't be fasting during Ramadan, I must refrain from making any comment. I don't know what your life is really like. If you don't fast, you may have your reasons. So why should I burden you by saying, but why aren't you fasting? What's that all about? Everyone has their own story. That's what's important, to get this message across. Because sometimes young people, I know when we were young, we used to make fun of someone who didn't fast and so on. Today, however, we have to explain to our young people that everyone leads their own spiritual life as they see fit. Another point of clarification, when women are in monstrous periods, they don't fast. Some have monstrosities that are difficult, painful, and so on. So we say that when a woman is in a period of monstrosity, she doesn't fast. She'll do her days during the year.
Like a pregnant woman?
For pregnant women, it depends on whether she's in the early stages of pregnancy. But as soon as she feels, I'd say, in difficulty, she should definitely not fast, like an elderly person, etc. Imams always recommend fasting for diabetics. First, listen to the doctor and not risk your life because it becomes a sin. I know that I am sick, I have diabetes, I have heart disease, etc. And I'm going to stubbornly continue fasting even though I risk falling into a coma. That is to say, I will even inconvenience the society around me. All these situations must be avoided.
How can we combat radical Islam?
I think we need to explain what Islam is. Islam is a vertical relationship between the faithful and their Creator. There is no intercessor, as the Imam said, and God will judge you according to your behavior.
In paradise.
Heaven or hell. So there's something called a scale. There are Quranic verses that speak of the mizan, a scale that will, throughout your life, calculate the number of sins and the number of good deeds, and so on. So this relationship you have it in your intimacy, and there, nobody can reproach you with anything. And I'm telling you, even someone who practices his religion assiduously, we were talking earlier about 5 prayers, there are devotees who, in addition to the obligatory prayers, perform several supererogatory prayers. There are almost a dozen daily that he can do. I don't mind. Ramadan fasting is 29 or 30 days a year. Some people are going to do as the Prophet of Islam did on Mondays and Thursdays, no less. I don't mind. What I mean by that is that if someone is considered a bit of a bigot, if he really devotes his whole life to worshipping God and respecting this right, I'll defend him to the bitter end. That's Islam. Radical Islam is in our horizontal relationship. I'm going to allow myself to judge you. I'm going to tell Mr. Imam, you're not behaving properly, or the Imam will judge us both. Then, as a Muslim, I'll take it upon myself to dictate how you behave. When there's nothing in the Quran or the Sunnah, whatever it is, that says, but Thibaut, you've got to do this. You want to go to heaven? I'll show you how to get to heaven. I'm not allowed to say. And from then on, we have this type of Islam that has gone astray, which means that I don't have to impose anything on you, even to Muslims. You're not Muslims, but my Imam, he'll say, look, the rector, he's behaving badly. The rector doesn't do this, the rector doesn't do that.
It acts as an intermediary.
Now he's going to appropriate divine power because there are Quranic verses that say, it's me, God, who decides. Does Thibaut believe in me or not? It's me, God. So why is the rector of the Paris Mosque or the Imam going to say, do you realize you're leading a depraved life? You've got to become a Muslim. I'm going to force you to join the Muslim religion. This isn't right. From that point on, we have a deviation from our religion, which unfortunately has become very common. And as you can see, it's a simple matter of going from reproaches that I can make to being more aggressive, maybe even violent and so on. And that's what's dirtiest about our religion today and actually taints it. And that's why the role of imams is crucial. They need to be trained. They need to have the pedagogy to be able to address the faithful and explain things to them. Imams today, even in their preaching, you know, for example, the neighbors. We're at the Paris Mosque. We're one of the few mosques in France that's right in the center. So we have neighbors. And the imams spend their time saying that you have to respect your neighbors, even when parking. In your car, you park. You put your car anywhere. I'm going to meet God. I don't care if I'm blocking. Well, the Imam tells them, no, your prayer won't be validated by God. How do you block someone's garage so they can get out and go to work? Why do you do it?
With respect for others?
We have to respect the rules of the society in which we live. In the evening, when we do the supererogatory prayers, the famous Taraweeh prayers, we end in a day of history. It's true that it's pleasant. On Ramadan, we go out, the weather's nice, we light up a cigarette, we'll chat, etc. We talk out loud. And people who are sleeping, who are going to work tomorrow, why am I going to disturb them? So the Imam urges the faithful, when they leave the mosque, to leave in silence so as not to make any noise, so as not to disturb the neighbors. So that's also the rule of savoir-vivre, living with others and not trying to impose yourself. I fast for me. I'm not going to tell you, Thibaut, that I'm fasting. You leave me alone. You leave me in peace. I'm pissed off. I'm tired. You're asking me to go over there. No, I'm fasting. That's behavior. That's not the behavior of a Muslim. Tomorrow is a very important moment too. It's called the 27th day vigil, Laylat al-Qadr. There's a Quranic verse that says the Quran in its entirety was revealed to the prophets of Islam, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on this celestial night. So this is an important moment. On this occasion, we try to create some entertainment, bringing together children who will come, to whom we will give gifts. The Imam will prepare a quiz on Ramadan for them. Afterwards, we'll recite the Quran because we're encouraging young children to learn Quranic verses. And at the same time, tomorrow we're going to distribute. When we talked about the Quran, I remembered because we have Qurans in Braille. We get a lot of requests like that. It's extremely complicated to produce a Quran in Braille. So here we have 70 Braille Qurans that we're going to give to people from all over France. Tomorrow we'll be holding a special ceremony for them. So these are expensive Qurans. It's a very mixed work. Now that's a Quran. Yes,
I've never opened it before.
This one's in Arabic.
All the faithful know how to read the Quran in Arabic.
I hope they do. You have to know Arabic, all these pages, which are the Quranic verses. The young Muslim, from the earliest age, as soon as he begins to learn the rules of Arabic grammar, etc., must begin to learn and read the Quran. Start learning and reading the Quran. This is the one we call the Fatiha, this surah, the opening one. When we pray, it's imperative that we recite this surah. Now, in every country in the world, whatever the natural language, prayer is in Arabic. Today, however, here at the Grande Mosquée de Paris, the Imam has to convey a message so that the faithful can understand it. So if he speaks entirely in Arabic, young French Muslims don't know what he's talking about. So we translate.
The whole thing is in Arabic, but there are parts in French.
So here we have a translated Quran. So you see, an introduction to the objective interpretation of the text.
All believers have read the Quran at least once in their lives.
In any case, we recommend it.
recommend it.
This is called the overture or prologue. This is the Fatiha I told you about.
Praise be to God, Lord and Master of the universe, merciful in essence and excellence, King of the day of retribution. It is you whom we adore, and it is from you that we implore help. Guide us on the right path, the path of those whom you have touched of your grace, and not of those who have incurred your wrath, nor of those who have gone astray.
And here you have all the explanations given by the translator. Then you have the cow, the Baqarah, which is also the second and most important surah. It's long and it deals with a number of themes. In other words, every surah in the Quran deals with important themes. Most of the surahs in the Quran are recommendations for everyday life, for spiritual life.
All right then, it's advice, it's a bit of personal development.
If you like, of course.
So, with regard to marriage, I have a question. Can a Muslim man marry a Catholic or Jewish woman?
Exactly, we're talking about marriage with people of the book, Jews and Christians, because the sine qua non is to believe in the same God, whether Christian or Jewish. That's the authorization that's written, that's given. You have to be at least a believer, and that's what's given in the Novum Coram. So you can get married. After that, there are other conditions too. Civil marriage is compulsory.
The priority is civil marriage.
Anyone, imam or cleric, who celebrates a religious wedding without a civil ceremony, 6 months imprisonment, 7,500 fine.
Oh, okay.
So we ask for a civil marriage. Once the civil marriage is established, we give them an appointment. Then we ask for the mandatory presence of both spouses.
Okay.
No power of attorney. 2 Muslim witnesses.
A Muslim woman cannot marry a Christian or Jewish man.
She can only marry a Muslim, but there's a lot of thinking going on, a lot of work being done to see if they can find something they can allow. But for the moment, a Muslim woman can only marry a Muslim man.
I agree. For the moment, that's the way it is. But can we say that it may change in
Perhaps.
the future?
There are reflections, perhaps. The presence of both spouses, the magic formula, as we say in America. We ask the woman if she agrees to marry monsieur. And if she does, it's to see if there's any coercion. It's not a forced marriage, it's a marriage of reason. Do they accept? At that point, he himself will recite the feast of hijab. It's a tradition, but not a religious one. Then he'll give them some advice, which are the fleas in the Quran. They are a home for you, you are a home for them. And the abode itself is the intimate place where you see the couple. They're going to find themselves, they're going to find that serenity, that security. It takes care of them, and they take care of it. Then we also take a reference from the Quranic inversions where God tells us, God has blessed you with her, and vice versa. So general advice, then we make invocations that God bless this union, this relationship. And we wish them nothing but the best. And then we draw up a marriage certificate in Arabic, in French, which Mr. Rector then signs, and we hand it over to the couple. That way they have both a civil and a religious marriage.
So there you see the carpets. These are for Friday prayers, because we're going to carpet all these places afterwards to enable the faithful to pray. Here's the library. This is the Saleh ibn Badis, named after the great Algerian Muslim scholar pictured here. In the mid-90s, he set up an association in Algeria and at the time allowed children to attend mixed schools. At the time, in France, there was a boys' school and a girls' school, but Ibn Badis considered that knowledge was essential for Muslims. Giving a child the opportunity to learn to read and write was necessary, and that co-education, boys and girls, was not an obstacle to learning. And so he created mixed schools to set an example and show that knowledge transcends all others.
In which country?
In Algeria.
In Algeria. The library is open to the faithful.
To everyone, of course. And here you see are some young students. We held a competition for them in 2082 to mark the centenary of the laying of the foundation stone of the Grande Mosquée de Paris. And so you have all the explanations of the mosque's architecture, Zeligi, the material you see everywhere. That's it, that's the material. That's right, Zeliga, it's just about everywhere.
Mosaic.
It's a mosaic that's made by hand, and it's used a lot in Arab Muslim architecture. I had fun working with the draftsmen to draw the different rectors who have succeeded each other. And so, Qadr ben Rabrit, from 1926 to 1954, who we saw earlier, was buried in the mosque. His nephew Ahmed, who stayed until 1957, so 3 years. As you can see, the dress is traditional here.
Okay.
After that, you'll see the tie with a little more of the shesh, but after that, it'll be removed. So here, Hamza Boubacar up to 1904, 82, 82, 89, 89, 92, Tidjane Hadam Dalil Boubacar from 82 to 2080.
And you are
I am here.
beautiful, very beautiful.
I'm the keeper of time. And I just wanted to show you this painting, which dates back to 1977. And it's the creation of the association. We're in the middle of the First World War. It's the association that's going to be created, which is going to be called the Société des Habous, which is in Arabic, the dead hand goods and the holy places of Islam, because the French authorities at the time are going to ask Qadr ben Rabri to organize the pilgrimage of Muslims who are in the Maghreb, so Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, so that they go to the holy places. And so it was he who organized the pilgrimage, because at the time the Germans had cut off the route between the Islamic holy sites and the Maghreb. They had cut Libya in two. As a result, pilgrims from the Maghreb couldn't go directly either by boat or by road. And it was Qadr ben Rabri who organized the pilgrimage from Paris. And when the First World War ended, that's when the project to create the Grande Mosquée de Paris really came to fruition.
A place of meditation.
That's it, absolutely. And here we go to the Garden of Eden. The founder of the Grande Mosquée de Paris, the first rector, Qadr ben Rabri, who is buried here. The tomb is here. Here you have two plaques commemorating the two world wars, the Second World War and the First World War, which were inaugurated by President François Hollande and President Sarkozy, respectively. And today, this tomb, this place, has become a place of remembrance. So whenever there are ceremonies of remembrance, etc., they take place here.
In memory of the soldiers.
Muslim soldiers who died for France. You have this Garden of Eden.
It's magnificent, isn't it?
A great source of pride for us.
Yes.
You see how this architecture.
Beautiful.
And then you have the minaret.
The minaret opposite.
And we're about to end this visit, or rather this pilgrimage.
This visit.
A plaque inaugurated by President Macron in 2022 to mark the centenary of the laying of the foundation stone of the Grande Mosquée de Paris. President Emmanuel Macron came to express France's gratitude for the sacrifice of Muslim soldiers during the First World War and to recall the Republic's action in building the Grande Mosquée de Paris. Here, I told you about the men who played a key role in the creation of the Mosquée de Paris. The first was Maréchal Lyoté with Edouard Herriot, who was a deputy, Paul Bourdari, who was a journalist at the time, and Sir Qadr ben Rabrit, the founder of the mosque shown here. And here we are visiting the site with Qadr ben Rabrit.
100 years ago.
The laying of the foundation stone with Lyoté. As I told you, they're calculating the direction to Mecca with the compass to then realize the mihrab. So this is the work that's been done. It's really a meticulous job that's been done. You can see the patio as seen earlier.
Photos.
Absolutely, absolutely. During the Second World War, Qadr ben Rabrit, along with one of his imams, Abdel Mesli, took a very active part in rescuing Jews who were being pursued by the Nazis at the time.
The Jews hid here?
Of course, the Jews were hidden here. Acts of conversion were performed because at the time, the Jews of the time were all Jews who came from North Africa, what we call Sephardim, who look like Muslims, who are circumcised like Muslims, because the Nazis would ask you to take off your pants to check if you were circumcised.
And how they made the difference.
So giving a conversion certificate to Moses, Jacob, etc., and they found themselves called Muhammad, etc., was the same thing. That's how
only the act of conversion could save them from the Nazis.
Absolutely. And Abdel Kader Mesli, the imam, who was assistant to the rector at the time, was deported to Auschwitz because he played this role in the basement of the Grande Mosquée de Paris. Many Jews have testified that I remember being saved. It's a very special story, and one that today shows the greatness of Islam. As Pope Francis has said, we are all human beings, creatures of God. The fact that you don't believe in Islam doesn't mean you're any less of a person, etc. I have to say, if you're in a situation like this, that you're not. If you're in trouble, it's my duty to help you. That's our religious obligation, and that's important to remember at all times.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thibault. Thank you for coming, for your interest in...
For all this knowledge, I think we've helped educate a lot of people through this video, and to put the minaret, if I may say so, back at the center of the village, or the church at the center of the village.
Thank you very much,
You're
Thibault.
welcome. Thank you very much.